Hello, you're listening to Count Richard von Coudenhove Kalergi. Today is Saturday the 19th of May, and here's a couple of comments since my last video. I have to say I really enjoyed my 5-day trip around the Ring of Kerry with beautiful sights, especially the mountain passes such as the Connor Pass, Mall's Gap, and my favourite being the hill climb out of Portmagee heading towards Ballinaskellig. We first stayed in Dingle and visited the Casement Memorial the following morning, and then in the afternoon visited the Blennerville windmill and had a very nice tour guide called Des who showed me around the workings of the reconstructed windmill, and it's where the Jeanie Johnson replica was built. The original built in Canada in 1848, and unlike the coffin ships where the Irish on the way to America died in huge numbers, never lost a single passenger during the between 6 and 8 week voyage crossing the roughest sea in the world, where in a 5-year period in the 1850s, 59 sailing vessels were lost in Atlantic storms. Our next night was in Dingle, which I have to say was a real gem and was really put on the tourist map after the making of the David Lean film Ryan's Daughter, which starred Robert Mitchum and Sarah Miles, and it is reputed that it was actually his favourite movie in 1969. It took a full year for the film to be made, and the English actor Trevor Howard noted that there was 52 pubs in Dingle but no restaurant, and the Slayhead Drive, beautiful Slayhead Drive with views out towards the Blasket Islands where Peg Sayers lived, and other famous writer was Michael O'Sullivan, and the outline of the Sleeping Giant. Dunquin was a very interesting harbour where the cows and sheep were brought to and from the Blasket Island by curragh. Not a very pleasant journey in rough seas for both the animal and the rower. On one of the mountain passes, while taking some photographs, the rumble of high-performance engines could be heard in the background, and 3 Caterham 7s and 3 Ferraris drove by in an almost Top Gear-like moment. So I gave them a thumbs up to the drivers, which was met with some horn honking, which I thought was nice. I also visited the Skellig Michael experience down near Portmagee, and it showed the harsh reality of the monks living in the beehive huts in quite detail. And it's interesting to note that the Skelligs are a World Heritage Site and come under the UNESCO umbrella, and the Irish government actually needs permission from UNESCO to do any work on the Skelligs, which strangely enough. And also one of the Skelligs has the second largest gannet population in the world, with up to 50,000 birds. I also visited Annascaul, which is the birthplace of one of my heroes, Tom Crean, who spent more time in Antarctica than any other explorer, and on 3 of his adventures with Scott and Shackleton, from the 1903 Discovery voyage through to the Tierra Nova voyage of 1909, in which Scott, after reaching the South Pole, only to discover that he had been beaten in the race by the Norwegian Roald Amundsen and died with 4 others on the return journey, and ending with the Endurance voyage with Shackleton of 1914, which kept him away from home for nearly 4 years, and retired to open a pub he called the South Pole Inn. Survived a raid by the Black and Tans, where he was about to be shot until a soldier, rummaging through an upstairs drawer, discovered his 3 polar medals, only to die of appendicitis in 1937. Valentia Island was really beautiful, with spectacular all-round views, and the crossing between Carsavine by ferry takes between 5 and 7 minutes at a cost of €8 per car and €2.50 per cyclist. And a drive to its lighthouse had an extremely narrow, steep and twisty road, should not be attempted by a nervous driver or with a car with a bad clutch. Sneem was also a hidden gem, with a river running through it, a quaint little village with coloured shop fronts, pubs and restaurants, and I bought an Aran cardigan of wool as a reminder of my trip. The week back has actually been an interesting week, with this week which I met up with a subscriber, a gentleman called John Mitchell, who I have met on a couple of marches, and attended a meeting in the Goat Grill with Josephine Madigan and Francis Fitzgerald about the divorce referendum and the reducing the waiting time to get divorced, and to recognise the divorce from outside the EU. During the question and answer session, I stood up and said that does this mean that the Irish government now recognises the results of Sharia courts? Well, I could see the two of them looking at each other with an expression, how do we answer that one? A member of the legal profession who was also on the panel answered with some random babble, which I have to say I've forgotten by now. When I went to ask as my second question, the compere, I think he recognised me from the last time when I asked Simon Coveney about signing of the Global Compact on Migration, said that you've had your question. I waited until after the event and approached the Minister and said that legislation in this country must factor in that would people coming into Ireland with different religious backgrounds and cultures could take advantage of loopholes in Irish law, and she admitted that it was something that she hadn't considered. I told her that in Germany that over 1,000 children, child brides under the age of 16, who came in as refugees had applied to be reunited with their adult husband, even though that this was a legal marriage under German law. I also mentioned that forced marriages within the UK citizens are taking place outside the UK, outside the EU, where husbands wanted to get permission to go back to the UK, even if it was against the wishes of their reluctant wives. She looked surprised and thanked me for my information. I also attended the Davonport Hotel on Thursday, where a press conference was held for all those 19 candidates in, I suppose it's the Dublin region or Leinster region who are running as MEP candidates, hosted by Pat Kenny, who gave each candidate 2 minutes to sell their campaign, followed by a question within the candidates to each other, and then the crowd was invited to ask questions. Gemma O'Doherty unfortunately didn't attend, which I was hoping she would, because he was very fair with the amount of time that he gave the people to answer questions. Neither did Ben Gilroy or Lynn Boylan. So at the question and answer session, I stood up and asked a question that I had concerns that the politicians are talking about climate change without being experts in climatology, and that the whole politicising of weather. I had concerns about the politicising of weather. I mentioned that the Vostok ice core samples dating back 420,000 years, and that the temperature had regularly been warmer than it is now, anywhere between 2 and 5 degrees, and I also mentioned that a report from the American Meteorological Society that noted changes in the Arctic Circle in relation to ice and heat of the water temperature and other issues that would be relevant to the current concerns, but also noted that this report was dated November 1922. I would have liked to have said more, like if the UN was so concerned about climate change with the signing of the Global Compact, what about the carbon footprint of bringing, according to their figures, 250 million people from an area of the world where they can't consume into an area of the world where they can, all at taxpayers' expense? But Mr. Kenny walked away. He did concede that the questionnaire seems to think that it is more to do with deep cycles. He directed the question to Herman Kelly, who gave a good answer, which is available on my last video. And I noticed today in the Irish Examiner there's a special report today about claims that Irish MEPs claimed up to €600,000 each in the most recent 5-year term. This figure is on top of their €105,000 salary, a monthly allowance of €25,000 to pay staff, and severance package of up to €210,000. Now keep in mind, I think that MEPs have a maximum tax rate of only 16%. Imagine that. Their investigation found that 9 of Ireland's 10 MEPs claimed €5.5 million in unvouched expenses during their 5-year term, with Ming Flanagan of the Ruski fame and Brian Crowley refusing to answer questions. Top claimant was Fine Gael MEP Mairead McGuinness, who received nearly €710,000 in allowances and reimbursements, 200,000 more than Lynn Boylan. I am amazed that these people who have been contaminated by the immorality of greed and entitlement are happy to drape themselves in the Irish flag while selling this country out to an ever-growing federalisation of the EU, forcing multiculturalism and bogus asylum seekers, 80% of which are reported to be bogus, who are taking the place of people who genuinely need our help. We are importing unemployment and crime. And am I supposed to work till I'm in my 70s to support their lifestyle? Did the leaders of the 1916 rising die to have the demographics and culture destroyed by a corrupt political class who are following geopolitical agendas such as the UN pushed Agenda 21, which Ireland signed in 1992? Time for change. Well, there are a couple of thoughts which are my own. Thanks for listening. Good night and good luck.